And I would like to see you all. Today we have additional event within the Forum 2.0, Artificial Intelligence During the War. And this forum is being organized by the Center for Democracy and Rule of Law with the support of Sweden. And this additional event of the center within the project initiative of the sectoral support of the civil society in Ukraine, financed by the agency USA and realized in the consortium of CEDEM and other organizations. And today we will try to talk about technologies of artificial intelligence and their impact to the civil society and challenges that we have, because now we have the things in our life. I love technologies very much, and I think that if we have something new, we shall use it in our life to make our life easier. But at the same time, any technologies, any novelties can be threatening, first of all, for the personal data and in general in the work of any other structures, civil society structures, for instance. That's why we decided such a discussion would be useful for all of us to discuss all the points and to find right decisions. How shall we regulate technologies in our life? How shall we regulate the use of the AI? And to understand that any novelties we have are the ones that can bring problems together with advantages. Today, we have a few speakers. I'll present all of them later, but now I would like to tell you about our work today. If you need a translation, we have one today. You can find the globe in the screen of your Zoom and choose the language you prefer. Also, you will have the possibility to ask questions to speakers after their presentations. And also, please make your comments as brief as possible, because our program is rather packed and we won't have a lot of time to the questions, but we would like all of you to share their opinion and speakers to answer your questions. And now let me introduce you our speakers. And first of all, I would like to present you Olesa Kolopik, who is the director of Center for Democracy and Rule of Law. Olesa. Thank you very much, Maria. Good day, dear participants of today's forum. From the Center for Democracy and Rule of Law, you are very welcome here on the second day of the forum, Artificial Intelligence Regulations Work During the War. And this site's event is about artificial intelligence and civil society organization. We have a kind of virtual round table today, and there are international experts, a representative of Ukrainian civil society organizations, and specialists are sitting around this virtual round table. The ones who are studying artificial intelligence and its capabilities, the words like Snapchat, deepfake, cameras that are able to recognize faces of the people. All these are part of the AI, but it's just the top of the iceberg. AI, it's about possibilities and risks alike. And today, we will discuss how it can help civil society organizations in Ukraine. And also, it's very important to touch upon the issues of regulations. What do we have now? What do we need tomorrow? And exactly that's why we gathered here today. And I would like to wish everyone to be very active today because that is the future we are living in now. And the more productive our discussion is, the more efficient we will use these technologies also. After this event, together with Initiative of Social Society in Ukraine, we are planning to make the products will be a kind of lighthouse in the world of AI. That's why please share your experience, recommendations, risks, because when we understand them, we can prevent them. Also, I would like to thank all the SEDAM team organizing this event, also the team of consortium that provide an intersectional approach to CCO. Also, I would like to thank our partners. I mean the team of the Embassy of Sweden in Ukraine for their support, because we have this annual forum for the second time only. And also, I would like to say one of the agencies of USAID for the support of our project and Ukraine in general. Also, please be careful to the side to the air raid sirens, because safety is the most important. If you hear the siren, please go into the shelter. Thank you very much. And now I give the floor back to Maria. Thank you very much, Olеся, for your welcoming works. That's important indeed. What to do? We have these events in our life, and we need to find the answer how to do it right. And now I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, who will tell us how artificial intelligence works is um, is being used for deep fakes, about the changes needed in legislation. And I mean Igor Raskladai, who is Chief Media Lawyer and Deputy Director of SEDAM. Igor, the floor is yours. Good day. When we were planning this event, we decided that I will be the first because I'm going to show you a lot of video clips, but I just want all of us to understand how ready we are for all these challenges that are being developed for a few years already, and to think about where is the legal line, where is the ethical line, because there is a lot of ethical issues here as well. And to understand that these technologies of artificial intelligence are here next to us. It's not the future. We're talking about something that we use already, or we play with without understanding that's AI. And what we shall think about, and legal limitations as well. Let me find you from legal framework. A few years ago, we didn't have even the definition of AI, but at the moment the situation is different. We have national strategy. We had some remarks to this strategy. We think that this strategy should be more about the human rights. Also, there is a law about the rights and by rights, and also there is information about the works created by AI, and can we call them works even? But we have more serious challenges as well. Some of them were on hold, but it doesn't mean they disappeared. And one of them is our privacy. When we walk on the streets, and we do not understand that we are under street surveillance, and they do not register just car number plates. It doesn't like they record them for some time, then they delete them. No, these cameras have function of face recognition. And it means that even in public places, hoping for privacy, we cannot get it anymore. And that's one of the first challenges. And it is fine if it is the area of some private interest, if someone is cheating, for instance, and was caught with the help of servants, that is a problem just of one person. But the biggest threat is when our regime is not very democratic, when we have street riots and live law enforcement agencies that are not always in the interest of the protestants can find and detain the participants. And that's one of the biggest threats at the moment, because we know the history of the independent Ukraine. We are fighting some oppressive regimes. After that, there is the clip back, then we are fighting again. And if not very responsible actors will have such an instrument, it will be a threat for our potential of the protest as well. So we should be careful with AI on that. And also there is some irritating things, because I'm sure that you try to call your bank and you do not talk to a person anymore. We are talking to robots, and we need to understand how to talk to a robot, how to talk in hashtags to be able to solve our issues. Not always we are successful. In the office, we had an interesting case. We tried to call to the bank, and the colleagues had a lot of fun talking to the robots, but they couldn't solve what they called for. Let's come back to the deep fakes. What is a deep fakes? What are the kinds of deep fakes? The main deep fake is the one that is called deep fake, actually, based on the data collected about some person. The series of videos is generated, and it didn't exist. Or, for instance, the video is real, but after that, audio was manipulated, or some parts of video were manipulated. I want to show you positive and negative examples, and to remind you that deep fake technology is just a technology. And here it's very important who is using it, what and what we need to do. Because well, you can use it in a different ways, like a hammer that you can kill with it, or you can plant some beautiful flowers. And now let's watch on different videos. Let me see. Let me that's my favorite example. That's Salvador Dali. Maybe someone already saw it.
I have a long-standing relationship with death. Almost 30 years. I enlive always believe the desire to survive and the fear of death were artistic sentiments. I understand that better now. But there is one thing that makes me different. I do not believe in my death. Do you?
Власне, це відео – це абсолютний діпфейк. Як ви розумієте, Сальвадор Далі помер достатньо давно. І це було створено музеєм Сальвадора Далі. І вони,
It was created by the Museum of Salvador Dali. He did die, and they analyzed a lot of images, a lot of videos. The one they were in black and white. And the computer models of Salvador Dali was generated because of that. And it's not their only one video. I will show you another one. In the museum itself, there is such a screen.
Дуже цікаво, яким чином була реалізована ця технологія. І на практиці це виглядає...
Look how this technology was made. And people just come to this screen, and Salvador comes, and they can make selfie with him, and after that to send it to their email.
Елемент edutainment, entertainment і будь-якого тейменту, який можна уявити. Тобто, насправді, для культурної сфери діпфейки є надзвичайно важливими і цікавими, тому що, вони можуть залучати за допомогою нових технологій до тих же музеїв, тому що музеї все ж таки стають менш, можливо, відвідуваними, бо є інтернет, і, в принципі, ти можеш, якщо тобі просто цікаві зображення, а не сама атмосфера, ти можеш спокійно відкрити там будь-який сайт, будь-який віртуальний музей, подивитися і нікуди не ходити, не витрачати гроші. І, власне, такі технології, вони заворожують, тому що це не лише про споживання безпосередньо.
Because this is not just about consumption. This is also about emotion, about interaction. And so culturally, we can see that deepfakes are obviously critical. Plus, there is another great example. Imagine that you're shooting a movie and your lead character suddenly dies. So you can cast someone real quick to fill for them, because you cannot really do the whole movie from scratch again. It costs. And so you can find someone who looks really like them and finish your movie. That's where deepfake technologies can be incredible. Let me also give you another example, something that surprised me a lot, and this is genealogy. There's this famous internet portal called MyHeritage. There's actually plenty of those, but this is the leading one of the leading ones. This is where you can find all those tech innovations, image enhancement and colorization. I'm going to show you something that might come across as creepy, but it seems pretty normal to me. This is my great grandma. I uploaded her images, and using the animation tools, this is what you can do. So you take just one image and the system can bring it back to life. I would not recommend using this on someone that you actually know. I mean, this person had died back in 1947. But anyway, This is where the technologies can be very impressive and pose no threat as such. But there is a but, as usual. I mean, if you take someone famous historically, someone who could end up on a film somewhere, you can make a video of them, you can add sound. This way you can create a fake historical video. You could spin it off online, and if it is someone who is not exactly, well, um, not exactly free of conflict. I mean, you could take Stepan Bandera, make a fake video of him, and show it to the Poles. I don't have to explain to you the kind of effect it could have. And the Russian propaganda has been using history in this way to ignite confrontation between Ukrainians and Poles, to try to do that. So they could take Stepan Bandera, this personality, and use it in this way. And so the reason I'm saying this and talking about this is that imagine that we take someone who is famous these days. You can take anyone, you can take their videos, you can process those videos, you can change the audio track to also align it with the way my lips are moving. And you can actually make a video of how I'm praising Putin, and then you can upload it online, and it could go viral. So if it is someone who you know for a fact could not have said it, but then you see a video of them saying something like this is how they can get discredited. And the artificial intelligence could be quite, and the technologies, I mean, could be quite dangerous in this way. Let me show you another video. This was one of the first videos of this kind to appear on YouTube. This is President Obama, as you can see. And obviously, this is a deep fake video. This is not actually President Obama talking. Let me mute the video. If you look real close right here around the mouth, the lips, you can see that something is off. It is not, the image is not sharp. It looks somewhat unnatural. And to the right, you can see how the voiceover was done. This is an actual actor moving his lips, and it is aligned with the video of Obama. This fake is, I think, 6 years old already, and the AI technologies have made some considerable progress since then. So we have deepfake videos with Mark Zuckerberg or Putin, and their quality is much better than that. I mean, it could give you a good laugh, but on the other hand, this is yet another evidence of the imminent threat. You need to have some really solid critical thinking skills to understand what is happening in your country and to actually tell deepfake videos from the true ones. This one has been launched or uploaded by the Russians. You can see that the head is obviously off. I mean, it's not really sitting on the neck. So this is really a cheap quality video. If they really spend the funds allocated for this purpose to the very purpose, the quality would have been much better. And you probably remember that It said that Ukraine is going to surrender, to lay down arms, things like that. Oftentimes, what saves the day is this Russian habit of just letting it be and turn out the way it may. But either way, these fake videos about political leaders could have some grave consequences.
Пов'язані з Ненсі Пелосі.
This fake is more shallow. This one, I mean, it's Nancy Pelosi. As you can see, let me play it for you. Here you can see how Nancy Pelosi is giving a speech. The topic doesn't matter. So what her opponents did, this was during her political campaign, actually. So what they did was slow down the audio.
Тобто, по суті, далі пішов розділ.
So basically, what they tried to spin off was that she was an alcoholic, that she was saying something while being hammered. And they had achieved this effect simply by slowing down the video, the sound. And they started this whole campaign off of it, how this leader, a potential leader, was given a speech while being drunk. Here you can see some really very serious threat. It has to do with the elections process, with how public image could be shaped depending on which political force is behind it. And in Ukraine, I'm afraid our elections are more about like beauty pageants when it's not the political platform that we're looking at and electing from. I mean, think back about how Yanukovych was elected. It was based on a completely different set of skills. So in a political environment like that, you could be very successful with such fake videos, and you could hurt someone's reputation badly, and it doesn't go anywhere. Now, the right to react. We know that there is this legislation related to the media. This law is actually coming into force in a week. If you look at the media consumption for the, say, last 3 to 4 years, you will see that over 60% of the Ukrainian population in Ukraine and abroad consume their information from the social media. I mean, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Telegram is one of the most dynamically growing ones, I'm afraid. So the question here is that the right to react and to reply when you're online, it is not really backed by anything, not yet at least. The social media, by their nature, mean that we're all living in our little bubbles. And something that you can post in your own bubble would never match the bubble that actually had started the spread of those fakes. Now, the speed with which the sharing happens, it would never let you defend your reputation properly, not at this point. And currently, we're lacking legal tools to do that, technological tools to do that. Even if you had a court decision, a verdict on your hands that would say that this person is not actually a unicorn, there is no guarantee that the audience who had consumed the first message would see this other one. And so I'm afraid that we don't have a real solution to that yet, alarming as it might sound. I mean, legally, technologically, etc. So the way out of this, the only way today would probably to manage your communications, to be able to respond and to send certain messages as part of crisis communications when, say, they have this 3 hours rule for the first reaction, then 2 days or 48 hours for the second reaction or response. Being able to actually communicate your message and to protect yourself, I mean, this looks much more solid than any other options, any other alternatives. I mean, the information spreads so fast that there is no court that could actually help you manage that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be handling this legally. We should. I mean, in the from the legal perspective, we should, but we should also be able to keep up with the pace. And jurisprudence is not always the most effective or the fastest solution for that matter. Now, regarding the GPT chat, I believe we will talk about this a bit later. Let me just say at this point that the current dynamics proves that this is a reality that is already happening, and we are living this reality. We're inside it. At some point, we had a discussion at Stanford with AI experts who are saying that it would take us another 30 years to actually get to the point of employing AI. But let me tell you that when it starts thinking on its own, we will face a whole other host of issues, and we will have different questions. And the Terminator would not seem such a remote, fantastic possibility anymore. So what we should do is look for answers, nonetheless, regarding what we could do here and now, say, in the context of preventing personal data from getting or being over concentrated. Something that we should be aware about. If we look at the case of China, any police officer has a body camera that can help them get all of your information, not just your name, but also your social credit score, any violations, any breaches. And this could be one of the biggest threats. This is where AI could become our enemy. Because unless we put in legal barriers, something that is already available internationally to have it work in Ukraine, personal data protection and other provisions. If we enforce it properly, for example, in those cities where we already have the cameras installed, for example, based on the legislation about the personal data protection, we can see the discrepancy here. You had apologies. I have to interrupt you because of the time constraints. Yes, sure. Let me just say that when we looked into the cameras, into the surveillance, we saw clearly that there is a lot of room for improvement here in Ukraine. Because if we just let it go, let it slide under the excuses related to the war or otherwise, it is going to make it that much complicated for us in the future. Well, thank you for your attention. I hope I didn't scare you too much with my videos. We're here to discuss the threats, to talk about what we could do. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you, Ihor. We can see a comment in the chat from Francesca, who says that I once talked to Amazon's bot customer service and asked, "Are you a bot?" The immediate reply was, "Okay, I will let you talk to a human." So And that's actually very nice because those chatbots are awful to communicate with. Let me just go over the questions real quick to save us some time. And just let me go ahead. Any advice for the activists how to protect themselves from the AI as a tool, AI being weaponized by the special services, say, and then protecting your privacy, your personal data? I mean, what systems to avoid and how to participate in rallies safely? I mean, if you could just go step by step over these questions real brief. Well, if you are in the spotlight for the special services, I mean, you should really consider your safety. I'm not sure if our international partners can be helpful here, because this is a whole different level of involvement. But regarding your privacy, I mean, do you really need that 50% discount to have your personal data just being uploaded online and its further whereabouts unknown? I mean, think about this. If at some point you see your personal data being used by someone that you didn't give it to, make sure to object. Now, about railing, that's a $1 million question, I guess. I mean, we do have the legislation, and we know that if we gather in a way that helps us protect each other, that can be probably the best tool for us to use. Also, you could rally up somewhere with less cameras. Then, on the other hand, given the number of drones employed in this war, I mean, even your vacuum cleaner could collect your data. So we just keep using our privacy, trying to make our life more simple. So there's a whole philosophy behind this discussion. I'm not sure if we have the time to address it just today, but it's great that we are talking about it to make sure that we continue this conversation, identify the threats, and find ways to prevent them somehow, to then handle such matters as the special services, the police, and other actors.
Thank you very much. Igor, I have a question as well. Now we focus on negative things a lot. Well, there was one episode about cultural, historical life, but my question is different. I know that now organizations are using AI to monitor fakes. That's my first question. So maybe you can tell us about the positive side of this sphere briefly. And second, if you're talking about the regulation of AI, the first thing we're supposed to have legislatively what we shall adopt. Well, I understand we cannot cover it all, but still something important to implement to save ourselves from the technologies. I think that, first of all, we shall ask ourselves, where is the threat? AI is computer, basically, and computers can be very different. It can be a tool, for instance, there is a smartphone, there are some modern computers, and that's a different story. That's why I think the first question is not about legislative changes, but threats for ourselves. Do we have regulations for these specific threats, requirements to the legislation we do have for 10, 12 years already, but the question is this GDPR legislation, does it protect us? Let's look at this specific norm and then decide, do we need to fix it? Do we need to talk to the ministry, to the local communities? that their situation is unhealthy and they need to change the provisions, where are they saved, who has access to these records. Let's define the problem first and then go to the solution. And ownership rights, that's completely different matter. Because there are some developments as well. You know, it's very positive because let's come back to this chat GPT, right? There were a few interesting publications from Kyiv School of Economics, for instance. They're using chat GPT for some practical task. It does help them. You know, we can give all our routine work to AI, and social media themselves, how they are fighting disinformation, how they are fighting hate speech, protection against terrorism. There are systems who help us with some functions, and it's not real to have so many moderators, because humankind is producing so much content now that it's just impossible to moderate it all by humans. But you know, at the same time, this error of false positive, it happens quite often. And well, sometimes there are some funny stories, you know, there are stories about Ukraine, for instance, but in it there is Russian narratives or something about Nazism in Ukraine. It tells us about the imperfection of technology at the moment and ethical issues as well. For instance, can we process the images of people who died just recently or not? My personal opinion is no, and the system shouldn't allow to do that, not to make other people depressed. But still, we need to discuss all that. Igor, thank you very much. I made the conclusion that first of all, we need to understand these technologies and then understand the problems behind them. Thank you very much for your info-packed answer. And now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, who will share with us the risks. The first speaker is Francesca Fanucci, who is the General Counsel from ECNL, and she will talk us about using of surveillance cameras. Igor just touched upon this issue. I hope Francesca will tell us more and can give us some international examples for our better understanding how it impacts people. Because in Ukraine, we don't have this problem at the moment. We have positive case how authorities are using these cameras, identifying the ones who committed war crimes in the territory of Ukraine. That is a positive example indeed, but let's have the full pictures of using video surveillance camera. Francesca, the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to share this platform with you. And I would like to share with you some slides regarding, I see that they've been uploaded in Ukrainian. Thank you for the translators. I will need to also review them in English at some point. But just so you know, I was asked to talk to you about the impact of AI used. Sorry for my voice. I recently had COVID and I'm still recovering. So I was asked to talk to you about the impact of CCTVs that have AI technology embedded, or the impact that they may have on fundamental rights. Now, when we talk about CCTV cameras with AI, essentially we talk about facial recognition technology embedded in these cameras. So I thought I should give you an overview of what facial recognition technology is, what it means, and how it can be used in several ways to make decisions. So if you could move to the next slide, please. So a way to put it simply, facial recognition matches images, faces, for example. And how does it do that? It uses the measurements of people's face, in this case. So every individual's unique biological features are called biometrics. So facial recognition used the face measurement to create a template, a geometric structure of each and everyone's individual face, and it compares it with the template that they already have stored somewhere. And how can they do that? They can do it in three possible ways. One is called facial verification, one is called facial identification, and the other one is called facial characterization. So if you move ahead, please. Can you move slide, please? So verification is matching one image with another specific image. It's called one-to-one because it helps the authorities, for example, determine if an individual shown in an image is the same person as the individual shown in another image. So this process can be carried out, for example, for purposes of authentication, or to make sure that the person is who they really say they are. So this is when you use, for example, your Face ID to unlock your iPhone. I don't know if you already have, should have this technology available in your iPhones. And, or for instance, when you scan passports at the airport, at the automated border controls, what the machine does, they check your image with the image on your document to make sure that they correspond. And the same with your telephone, they match your image with the one that is already stored on the phone, which allows them to verify that it's really you. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Another possible way, another technique is identification, which is also called one-to-many. This means that the machine, the technique compares one face with a series with many pre-existing faces. For example, faces that are stored in a watch list by the police or in a watch list by a shopping mall in a private center, in order to find if that single image corresponds to one of the many images already stored. So, as you can imagine, this is a system that is often used by the police, for example, to identify potential suspects or criminals in a crowd. And sometimes it is also used by shops to identify people that were already previously signaled as shoplifters, so to make sure that they don't enter their premises again. If you could move to the next slide. And finally, we have another way to use facial recognition technology, which is for classification. So facial recognition can be used to try and identify the general characteristics of a person. So in this case, they analyze the facial features of a person, but in order to understand, for example, if that person, what kind of expression that person is having. Is that person laughing? Is that person scared? Is that person serious? And why do they do this? Because they want to understand the emotions of those people. For example, they want to understand how they respond immediately to a certain image. So this is a technique that he used already in many cases in advertising. There are countries in which there is billboards with the camera on top and with adverts below. Every person that passes by looks at the adverts and they have an immediate reaction. For example, the adverts makes them smile or makes them interested. The machine scans their image to interpret that expression and try to understand, for instance, if that advert is catchy enough, if that person is captured. And this helps advertisers understand if their advert was successful, if, understand if their adverts generated interest. And in some cases, this goes as far as making the panel interactive, which means that as soon as I understand that you're interested in the type of image, I will personalize the adverts that only you can see, in order to make you stand and look and take notes. Now, like I said, this may not be the case in Ukraine yet, but it is already the case. They have piloted these systems, for example, in some airports in the United States to personalize the information of flights or other adverts for the people. So, and it is also used in some cases, it has been piloted to identify emotion for preventive policing. So people that watch protests live and identify the facial expression of some people can decide, the police, for example, that some people are probably going to start being violent, and they are ready to go, or they put a particular attention on certain people that may be dangerous. If you could move to the next slide, please. Now, why do we say that they use AI? Because what happens here is that although this happens with different complexity level, these types of facial recognition technologies rely on statistical analysis and on systems that are based on algorithms. So machine learning, that is artificial intelligence. Because what they do is that they are trained on data sets of images that help them identify consistent trends and patterns in the biometric templates. So that's why we say these are artificial intelligence, because the machines, based on this training, learns to make their own assumptions and recognize similarities, similar features. Please, could you move to the next slide? Now, and we must also bear in mind that all these typology, all these different types of uses that I've told you, can also be done in two ways from a point of view of timing. One is live facial recognition technology, which means that the images that are scanned by the machine are happening in real time. For instance, the cameras, the CCTVs placed on the street that see people passing by, and in real time they match them, for instance, with watch lists at the police station or watch lists at the shopping mall premises. So this happens in real time, the work of the machine. But there is also another way to use this technology, which is retrospective. It means that the camera records the images as well. And then the police or the shopping malls or whoever else later on can go through those images and make the matches, not in real time, but at their own leisure. And this happens frequently when the police, for instance, wants to conduct investigations. They don't know at the time of the filming that something is happening. They learn later on that there was a suspicion of a theft or robbery or accident. So they have to go back to those images, which are stored somewhere, and they do the matching at a later stage. Please, could you move a slide? So what are the immediate potential risks of this use? Well, first of all, as you can imagine, there can be false positives because what the Fundamental Rights Agency of the EU, for instance, in a report that they produced on analyzing the impact and the functioning of these machines, what these machines essentially produce are probabilities. They are never certainties. So there is a high probability that these images matches, but it will never give you a 100% certainty. And let me tell you, if the machine produces, I mean, this is not the case now, it's still worse. But let's imagine that the machine produces 1% margin of error. So is it possible that only 1% of the images identified are mistaken? We are still talking about, say that there are 100,000 people in the street protesting. The machine is bound to wrongly identify 1,000 people, which you may say, yes, 1,000 out of 100,000 is only 1%, but it's still 1,000 people that will be falsely identified as positive and may be called to respond for crimes that they did not commit because they appear. And why is this possible? It's possible because it very much depends, for example, on the quality of the images. So the machine may have not so granular images. Unfortunately, it depends also on the reflection of the light. Sometimes it can be the sun, sometimes it can be the rain, and the reflection of the light has an impact, for example, on the color of the skin, on the color of the hair. And very fair-skinned persons, for example, will be more exposed than very dark-skinned persons. And indeed, we still have examples of facial recognition technology that cannot detect, clearly identify Black people, the features between each other. So, and this leads to, as you can see later, to potential problems of discrimination. Another point that is often neglected, the machine does not seem to recognize well people with disabilities. People may have tics in their faces or jerks because they are in pain, they suffer. The machine does not, immediately constructs a different templates that can be confused with people's faces. Now, obviously, there is a risk of false positive, people that are wrongly identified as suspects, for example, but there is also the risk of false negatives, people that should be identified and that are not identified when they should have been. Now, if you could move to the next slide, please. Now, these are all the potential risks when we think in terms of human rights. So one is obviously the risks of the infringement of the right to privacy, the obvious one, because let's say that CCTVs are placed in a street with the purpose to recognize potential, in your context, for instance, potential trespassers from Russia or potential infiltrated or people. Yes, but in the meantime, a lot of people's faces are scanned. Once again, imagine if those images, like I told you, are also stored for future reference. Who assures me that those images will not be used for something else as well? And there are lots of innocent people in between. It's not just the potential Russians trespassing. But then, so there is a risk of bias and discrimination because, like I said, the machine struggles to identify people of color, people of different ethnic origins. It can make mistakes depending on the quality of the images, on the quality of the light. And even the images on which the machines are previously trained, you have to be careful what data sets have been used to train the machine to recognize that person from one person. If the data set was biased, the machine will reproduce and amplify that bias in real life. Now, one other problem is that these systems are very opaque in their functioning. No one really knows. I mean, and sometimes the vendors of these technologies do not want to disclose information about the data that they used to train them and what algorithm they're using. And they cite copyright, property, privacy, property copyrights. They don't want to share this. I mean, we are aware, for example, that some time ago, the Ukrainian government was offered by Clearview AI a data set to be, and the recognition, the facial recognition technology to identify Russian for this. But we understand the need, the urgency, and the enormous need to the purpose was, to identify these people. But do you actually know, did the government actually know how Clearview AI had gathered the data on which the machine had been trained, how they had trained, the impact assessment made? So it's important also to be cognizant of the whole process, that there is a transparency to be able to identify the potential mechanism. Now, another thing that I would like to mention from the UK, where I live, it is important. You initially start using these machines, for example, the CCTVs, for a purpose, like identifying criminals or Russians coming to Ukraine. But once you have the technology, countries and governments soon realize that the technologies can be used for anything else, even for a different purpose. And believe me, they do use it with the only, minimum caveat that they don't tell you. What happened in the UK was the police in Manchester introduced CCTV cameras in certain streets that were often crowded with protests, manifestations, and marches. So they put the CCTV cameras to say, when there are protests, we will activate them, just to be sure that, there are no violent people that are already in our watch list. So it's for your protections, it's your safety. What turned up later is that the social services, the benefit department of the government, well, the one located in Manchester, that was the city, started saying, so you have these images of people marching. Do you keep them or do you delete them afterwards? No, we keep them because we may need them later. Very good. Can you share them with us? Because we have suspicions that people with disabilities that claim benefits from us may actually take part in these protests. So we want to scan your images. We have watch lists. We have got our own list of people that claim disabilities with their picture. We want to scan your images and see if by any chance any of these people were taking part in this protest. Because if they took part in this protest, for us, it's evidence that they are defrauding the system because, for instance, they are not disabled. So the police did share these images. The department started using them. Indeed, they did identify some of these people. They called them to say, we are going to charge you with fraud because we understand that you were there at that time of the day. And the people obviously said, how do you know? But the government wouldn't say, because we asked the police to share the images, because they knew that it was illegal, because when the machines were set, the legal base was for one purpose. It wasn't for that purpose. It wasn't transparent at all. On top of that, what turned out is that a lot of these people happened to be there in that street because they were going, for example, to buy a medicine at the local pharmacy. That was the only day that they were going out because they had to. Incidentally, there was a protest at the same time. They were caught in the crowd. So the people watching the images assumed that they were part of the protest, but they weren't. But they were put in a position where they couldn't defend themselves. So it took a lot of freedom of information requests sent to the police, sent to the government to say, did you use those images for this purpose as well? Why was it not clear? Why did you not let people know? So, like I said, I don't want to give bad ideas now to maybe government people but this is happening. Unfortunately, bad ideas do circulate and spread. Once you have the technology for something, it's inevitable that people start thinking, I can use it for this as well. I can use, which, we can decide whether it's good to do it or not, but it needs to be transparent. It needs to be clear, and it needs to be consulted with civil society. So I would like to move now to the next slide. So we are moving now to the international standards which are available. And I would like to start from the Council of Europe international standards, because Ukraine is a member of the Council of Europe. Ukraine signed and ratified Convention 108 on the automatic processing of data and the protection of the privacy. So under the aegis of this convention, the Convention Committee produced these specific guidelines on facial recognitions, which all member states should follow. And as you can see, I mean, I cannot go through the exact list myself because I cannot read Ukraine, but I do remember, there are principles of data minimization, for example. So any video material that is not relevant to the purpose of the processing should always be removed or anonymized. For example, by blurring the images. Once you have identified the people that you need, why do you need to see anyone else? You have your person. Then you have to be transparent. So you have to ensure that if you established that technology for a certain purpose, for example, in cases of emergency, you have to ensure quality of the data sets, transparency of the whole process, traceability. So if I want to contest the result of that process, there has to be access to how that process worked. And obviously, you have to guarantee rights of access to justice, right to remedy, right to information. All these safeguards must be in place in the provisions that regulate the use and deployment of these technologies. If you can move to the next, please. So, but then again, as you can see, even the Council of Europe recognizes that in some cases there should be a moratorium before these technologies are actually deployed until we have understood their impact assessment. Could you please move to the next slide? And then we also have, I mean, I can take questions on these specifically, but I just wanted to show you there are other guidelines, for example, from OSCE, of which Ukraine is also part, which indicates how in cases, for example, of assemblies and gatherings, there should be careful protections of the right to peaceful assembly when these technologies are deployed. If you could move to the next, please. And then, I mean, we also have in the EU, the European Data Protection Board, which sets up their own guidelines in a joint opinion with the European Supervisory Board. And you can see that they even call for a ban until of these technologies until they have their impact has been properly assessed. Now, if you could move ahead. And then, I mean, as you all know, as you all are aware, the EU is currently negotiating a EU AI Act. And I just wanted to flag here one of the provisions, Article 5, which includes what are going to be prohibited. There is a strong push to include facial recognition technologies or biometric remote identification by law enforcement authorities, but with some exceptions in very urgent cases, proven cases of where it's needed to identify, for example, terrorists or for children protections, etc. If you could move ahead, please. Now, and last but not least, as you can see, the European Data Protection Authority Board and the European Data Protection Supervisory Authority even call for specific bans of these technologies because they are inherently considered as disproportionate in their outcome on the rights of other people. But let me move on to, so yeah, there is a very strong push towards this. If you could move on, because the last point that I would like to make, I'm only too conscious about the peculiarity of your own situation. So I have heard already in the past, say, oh, you are discussing from the luxury of a very, stable situations, but what about situations of emergency which require tough measures? The international standards look into that as well, as you can see from the next slides, because if you could move ahead. The International Covenant on Civic and Political Rights of the United Nations, Article 4, establishes conditions of situations of emergency, which include the situations of war and armed conflicts, in which obviously states can derogate to the ordinary protection. So you can lower some threshold of protections, but this doesn't mean that those rights might disappear. So when, in other words, when you establish an invasive system like a CCTV, this by itself already reduces the privacy of people, but does it have to, are there some passages in which you can still protect the rights of people? For example, you establish a sunset clauses by saying, this is just for the extraordinary situation of identifying the Russian. So when the war is over, these CCTVs will go because we did it for this situation. When the situation doesn't exist anymore, we promise you that we won't remove them. That's why I'm saying you have to be clear on the purpose, because at first you can justify, but it's very easy to say, well, now that they are here, we may as well use them for something else. No, then you have to reassess how invasive they are and what is the balance between protecting the safety and security of the people and protecting the other people's rights. If you can move to the next, and that was the last. Just to tell you that even the Council of Europe establishes the same safeguards in terms of emergency situations. So yes, you can, but you have to be transparent on what specific aspects you reduce, why, for how long you are expected to do it, and periodically even review and assessment, possibly with the help of relevant stakeholders from civil society. And then the last slide is my personal thank you and Slava Ukraini, because I'm with you all the way.
Героя слава. Героям слава. Франческа, ми маємо декілька запитань.
Francesca, we do have a few questions about any experience in terms of litigation related to facial recognition and how to have the data removed from the system. But let's try to be as concise as possible because we are running out of time.
Well, I can say, for example, in the UK, we have an NGO, Privacy International, that conducted litigation and managed to obtain the courts in the high courts in the UK that established that the use made by law enforcement authorities, for example, in Wales, but also in some parts of England, were disproportionate. They had established these CCTV cameras without testing them properly, without offering guarantees on where the data had been trained, how it had been stored, for how long it would be kept. So once again, in some cases, it's not so much the fact that they use CCTVs, it's how they use them. And for instance, in the case of Manchester that I quoted, the fact that they also used them, they had shared them with other departments without making it transparent as a protest. And even when they sued, the government sued people claiming benefits on the pretenses that they were defrauding, they wouldn't disclose how they had obtained that information. So yes, there are examples of litigations, successful litigations, which has led the courts to say, either you provide guarantees or these technologies have to be banned. Now, again, this is different from your peculiar situation, dramatic situation in which you are in an official situation of emergencies. But even in that case, like I said, there has to be, you have to think of the future. Hopefully, obviously, someday this war will end. And what will happen then? What is already happening now? How are they gathering this data? How are they protecting this data? You also have to think that this data may end up in the wrong hands. So if you hastily start adopting technologies that are not sufficiently safe, you may also have the paradox that they end up in the hands of the Russians. So once again, be mindful that you have to think of how to protect your own people, not just defending them from the foreign enemy.
Дякую, Франческа. Тут ще одне питання щодо...
Thank you very much, Francesca. Another question here that the state always will try to control the society, and it can be used, for instance, for the garbage bins, how we don't sort out garbage. No, sorry, that was different. What can be the reason to reinforce the use of artificial intelligence?
I'm not sure I understood the question. No, I mean, I like the example of the garbage because it is actually...
No, sorry. I understood in Ukrainian what they mean. I'll tell you now. For instance, if in the garbage bin will be the series of the explosions, can it become the reason to reinforce the use of the artificial intelligence?
I mean, I don't think that has to do with the facial recognition, but let me tell you, the city of Amsterdam, for example, that is not at war, but they are already testing, piloting an AI system. This is just to make sure that the people that collect the garbage from the council, from the city, well, they are going to send a machine to do the differentiated collection. So what is recycling, what is not recycling, but that in itself is being, you would think of something that, and obviously if they recognize something that is dangerous, to stop and alert the authorities. But this would be done by the machine. Now, even in a case like this, they are consulting with civil society organizations because, yes, it can be useful for the right to a healthy environment. It can be useful for security if you spot that some people throw something. It could be a firework, it could be an explosive or something. But at the same time, it might cause problems of breach of privacy or false accusations, because what the machine does, it finds something that could have been thrown by someone else. So once again, how do you make sure that you, what do? You put a CCTV checking what people put in their garbage? They might be putting it inside their homes, but someone else may have access to the garbage when they are outside for collection. So yes, everything is possible, but all the pros and cons should be carefully assessed, because an impact assessment includes also risk assessment and mitigation. So what measures can you take to reasonably preempt or limit the damage that can be done? So one thing doesn't exclude the other. It's not that because you identify a risk, you say, no, I don't want to use it. Let's try to find a less intrusive way to use it, or let's try to find a remedy, or let's implement the right of access to remedy, the right to contest for the people that are affected. This is not a black or white situation. Obviously, it has to be contextualized.
Дякую, Франческо. У нас нема більше запитань, тому ми
Francesca, thank you very much. There are no questions to you anymore. And now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, Tatiana Avdeeva, who is the lawyer in the
одразу задам питання, яке вже звучало в чаті. А як захистити себе під час мирних зібрань
in the digital security lab, and Tatiana will tell us about how to protect ourselves in artificial intelligence. Well, you know, this topic has been relevant for a few years already. After Francesca, it's very difficult to speak because Francesca made such a wonderful presentation about the problems, challenges, and risks. But briefly, I would like to react to some of the theses and to expand the discussion. What we knew from our Ministry of Digital Transformation yesterday. On Clear View, for instance, there is an ongoing discussion. Of course, civil society in Ukraine is not particularly happy about the use of this technology, and one of the questions was, is this technology will be in use after the end of the armed conflict? Well, we didn't get a specific response, and for me, such situation is always an alarming signal, because we are not sure for what this technology will be used. Maybe not for identification of Russian soldiers anymore. It can be used for other purposes as well. And the use of such technology may be improportional. That's why there are a lot of threats. Regarding the national legislation, well, there is none. We have the concept of artificial intelligence development, and 3 or 4 times they are mentioning human rights very generally. The problem is there are no technical standards impacting the human rights or any kind of legal restraints, and also there is no rigid obligatory regulation. So the obligations of the state are absent at the moment, and that is a big problem, because there is a law about the personal data protection. Because if you are talking about system regulated by the AI, first of all, we need to understand where to take data to create such systems, where to take data to train these systems, and against who these systems can be used. So almost at every stage of the development or use of AI systems, there will be a question about personal data use. Our law about personal data protection is rather outdated, and take into account automated processing of the personal data, it cannot reflect the current realities. There were attempts to adopt a new law, but unfortunately, last year it didn't pass through the parliament. The MP sent it back, and at the moment, national legislation doesn't correspond to GDPR. So in this direction, we as a civil society, we and lawmakers shall put a lot of efforts into legislation of already existing technologies. We have no regulations in the personal data protection, but it doesn't mean that we do not have technologies for that. In 2021, I was working in SEDEM still, and we made a large research on the use of CCTV cameras, the ones that can recognize the faces. These cameras were used for identification in subway, and in the same way, there were no legislative basis to use such technologies. Mainly, they were installed through municipal authorities. But the law about municipal authorities doesn't have any provisions authorizing local authorities to install such cameras. So any kind of regulations or bylaws were not based on the law, and there was the initiative of the municipal authorities, and at the same way there were no technical requirements to these cameras at the national level. For instance, and we discussed it yesterday partially at the panel on privacy protection. Rather dangerous technologies are being used, for instance, cameras reacting to the movement. And now, within international experts, there are a lot of questions on using Chinese technologies. Technologies which were developed in the state where personal data protection index is very low, and it's hard to check what are the risks technological including. But from what we can see now in Ukraine, especially in the state authorities, there is a lack of technical experts who could analyze such technologies. We have this problem on two levels: on the problem of legal regulation and on the level of technical capabilities. As from technical point of view, there are a lot of gaps. And here it is important to understand that notwithstanding the martial law, notwithstanding the derogation from international conventions, still minimum standards should be met. Because if we don't, we will have other risks connected to the war. For instance, if technological standards are not met, this system can become the object of the hacker attacks. And after that, this data can be leaked to Russia, to Russian militaries who will plan operations with help of them. And yesterday also, they mentioned data in the medical institutions. Medical institutions can easily transfer data from one medical institution to another one, but there are no unified standards on this data transfer. Correspondingly, if such system will be the object of hacker attacks, data about veterans, data about militaries, including the ones who are still in hospitals, in which hospitals, who are injured, can be leaked into internet and become available for Russia, for instance. And that's very dangerous. And I think we cannot tolerate such situations because of the national security, because it creates additional risks for national security. This coin has two sides. And regarding the peaceful gatherings, I remember when we had well-known protests for activist Ternenko in the center of Kiev, there were a lot of rallies and demonstrations. And the representatives of internal affairs of Ukraine said that the most active protestants then will be identified with the help of face recognition technologies. This situation hasn't been developed. We don't know. Was it just empty threat from their side, or they did it? But the fact itself that such declarations can be made from the side of law enforcement agencies or is rather alarming. It can see that the state can cross the red lines, especially when there are no guards and there are none. Also, the problem is not just in using such systems during rallies or demonstration. Well, that's bad enough, actually, and it cannot be tolerated up to me. But I'm worried what to do if they are used. Do we have any kind of appeal mechanism in which way this data can be used? The problem with Clearview is not about the technology, which is dangerous, and data collected from social media are processed by the companies illegally because they don't get approval from the users and they use it without approval. But when someone is identified at the black post, at the crossing point, they can open proceeding, for instance, based on it. Because if someone was identified, and especially if it was mistakenly identifying as the one having connection with Russian Federation, there are different aspects. So, well, that is one of the people who cannot be on the territory of Ukraine. The question is, can it be the ground to open the proceeding? And if yes, what are the procedural guarantees? Will it be the evidence for the court? Because at the moment in the criminal penal code, there is no information about such evidence got from facial recognition technology devices. And in the case, if courts decide that is proper evidence and there is no need for additional checks, additional research, there is no need for them or no need for the thoroughly check. It can create a dangerous precedence. In USA, already were such cases based solely on the results of such systems. And this case were very frightening because system makes mistakes quite often. If it happens during the war, it's also dangerous because in the society, this person will be labeled as a criminal who helps the country aggressor. And this social tax, well, that's, it's not a legal issue, but the social effect is very dangerous indeed. That's why, well, it's not about the impact to the peaceful gatherings, but what to do with the consequences. Because at the moment, and we can see it all over the world now, we cannot fix adequately the consequences of using such technologies. And as a result, we have a problem when we are developing the AI technologies till the end of the year, this act will be adopted and Ukraine starts implementing it. Well, that's what we do. But besides development of the regulations, that substantive one, it should be procedural part. And I'm concerned about this part. In general, I agree that there are a lot of risks connected to these technologies, and we need to think about these risks elimination or mitigation, their impact to human rights. We cannot wait till the end of the war. We cannot wait till the victory. Well, that's a good approach, but it's not enough in current conditions. And now there are some limitations for the peaceful gatherings online. Now they are talking about the right for the freedom of peaceful gatherings online, and that's how it can be implemented successfully. If the images from social media will be gathered, it also can have their own threats. Let's expand this discourse and look for the approaches to fix these problems now. Well, probably that's all for me, and I would like to give the floor back to Maria. Thank you very much. I see no questions at the moment. But, dear colleagues, if you have any questions to Tatiana, please remember them, and then we will have a time for that. And now I would like invite our next speaker, Veronika Boyko, Head of Social Department, EU Control, expert at the Open Data Association. And Veronika will tell us about possibilities for AI opportunities for CSOs. Can it help to check the counterparts and establish cooperation? Veronika, the floor is yours.
Greetings, everyone. Yes, just to add to what Tatiana has said, every time when we use technologies, we need to weigh the benefits against the cost. I mean, we should get more positive outcomes than negative ones. And then based on that ratio, we should be able to measure the impact and manage the process. And this is true not just for the state, but also for the CSOs and other stakeholders. The reason I'm mentioning this is because for 8 years, we've been working with the open data sources and using the tools. So for 8 years, we've been designing the tools to do the verification. This works for the lawyers, for the investigative journalists, and other actors who use artificial intelligence. Mainly, this is done for the purpose of monitoring, to make sure that those checks and balances are in place. This is a technology in itself as well. And so I was talking to my colleagues about the use of artificial intelligence and any potential life hacks. We're an IT company, and I'm hoping that our experience could also be useful for you. So 20% of the employees reported having had some use of artificial intelligence. But let me tell you right away that if we're talking about counteragent verification, it is too soon yet to make any claims. Again, due to the number of reasons that we will mention a bit later. Like I said, we are a Ukrainian tool based on different sources of data, the registers and others that you could use to verify or vet your counteragent or anyone basically. This could help locate Russian assets abroad and seize them. So this could work for the competent authorities in Ukraine and abroad. If a Russian national has assets in Italy or France, if they run a company there, for example, this tool could be helpful. You could download information real fast. If, for example, you need to know how many companies are producing milk with the biggest turnover, for example, you could filter them out. Or you could use other indicators. We've also taken into account the recommendations of the Security Service of Ukraine to counteract propaganda and other other movements. Say you could use this free of charge. Now, speaking of artificial intelligence, when we designed these services, we did test the AI. At first, we were looking into cooperation, not so much into verification. I mean, recruiting, brand applications, content making, event organizing, or coding even. You could use it to design your product strategies for your marketing purposes, to cooperate with your partners for commercial purposes, or for jurisprudence. So to sum it up, those 20% of the employees using AI, here's the breakdown. You can see that ChatGPT is the most popular one, but it is not the only one, particularly when it comes to images. For example, the resolutions that would help you code. Now, what we've learned is that AI is best to facilitate your cooperation with the partners when you work on some kind of content, for example, when you write emails, when you put together tables or checklists, when you strategize or plan, or when you code some elementary functions, for example. For example, if you want to track news daily, you could do some basic coding and have AI do that for you. So something really down to earth and simple. Now, if you feel that you're lacking inspiration, for example, you could look for answers with the help of AI. Now, what's important is that any kind of request that you make based on the AI or using AI, you should always double check the result. Because speaking of articles, for example, and we know that Google is working on their own AI engines, the risk here is that if you've been using something adjusted to Microsoft, for example, Google will learn real soon how to identify those publications. And once it identifies your publication, it would impair your rating or ranking. I'm sure you've heard about students using AI to write their papers, and this is probably not the best use because it's always great to use your own thinking. At the same time, we know that there are special tools that can help you identify whether or not AI was involved in the writing of a given paper. To prepare a presentation like today, for example, you could use artificial intelligence. Take, for example, the GR case. We do have this department that deals with government relations. And I think we sent one of our partners 4 or 5 even emails, and we didn't get a response. So at some point, we decided to go ahead with the experiment and asked the AI machine if it could make any changes to the email to make sure that it stands out, which would increase our chances of getting a reply. And this was a result. This was the result that we got, and we actually did receive a reply. Coincidence or not, but it worked. And I think that it's a great case of how you could use AI. But again, you should always double check, you should always adjust any piece of text that you're getting from the machine to your own style or needs. Now, our experience hasn't been all that cloudless. Take, for example, counteragent verification. Different AI solutions. We can see that the up-to-date information is not always available, but this is not the worst, actually, the worst thing about it. The non-linear character of the verification and nature could also be critical. I mean, who your counteragent is, what their expertise is, what the field is, whether or not they they are founders of any companies, or if they filed any suits against anyone. So you have this kind of a checklist to do your verification. AI would give you something that is not exactly based on evidence, because that evidence could be fake, or the data could be aggregated in a manner that would make it nicer or more appealing. There's no reference to sources, or some of the sources referenced are fake or even made up. Or if, for example, you inquire about yourself, and then you will see that some of the data is actually about something that never existed. Or it could be that you are being presented with only positive information to, say, facilitate cooperation. But that would also mean that some of the facts are being left out. If the evidence is insufficient, if you cannot track it back or down to the original source, that could also impair your operation. Plus, you never know what that AI is thinking. I mean, here is an example of a fact checking from GPT chat. You can see how it cites 3 different research initiatives. But when I tried to track it back to the source, turned out it never existed. I mean, those agencies do carry out research, but they never carried out anything of this kind. So you could use AI to, say, process some information for you, give you some ideas, maybe inspire you. Well, hopefully it improves in the future. But just to sum it up, let me tell you that it is crucial that the data that we're using are of high quality, that the information fed into the AI is structured, that it is clean. And this is what we've been working on for the past several years. We need to have access to information in order to be able, among other things, to control the government. So it is just some food for thought for the AI. If we provide it with the food for thought, the AI could help us find some patterns and do it quickly. It is already possible, so let's look at the bright side and let's keep looking for the solutions and best applications of AI to prevent any negative usage of the existing tools, but to make our lives easier. Thank you. Thank you so much, Veronica. I actually really like this approach because I'm a big fan of technologies, but I do appreciate the threats as well. I mean, before we use anything, we should do our homework to know what we're actually dealing with. This way, it would help us in case of any negative outcomes. As far as I can see, we don't have any immediate questions. We're running out of time, so I would encourage my colleagues to stay back a little bit to make sure that everyone has a chance to present. And at this, I would like to pass the floor to Olha Petrev to give us a little bit of the legal perspective and to tell us more about the CSOs, about copyright, including ChatGPT and the products that it generates in the context of the projects funded by the international donors, for example. So, Olha, let's try to keep it brief.
Ольго, Ольго, я не знаю, чи це в мене, чи
Olha, I'm not sure if it's me, but there's something with your sound that seems to be. We can't really hear you.
Можливо, навушники підключіть, тому що у вас проблеми
Could you maybe connect a headset because there seems to be something wrong with your mic.
Вас тепер взагалі не чути.
We can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Там на налаштуваннях мікрофону можна змінити.
You might want to change the settings of the mic. About now? Yes, this is much better. All right. So I would like to start by saying that. Hold on a second. So, a few words about how we could use ChatGPT including for drafting the laws. What's important to understand is that the chat is being trained on big arrays of data. And as you can see from my slides, hopefully you can see my presentation. Let me know. Yes, okay, great. So slide 1. Next slide, please. Yes. So as you can see, we can take a few steps to improve the process. So my inquiry was into the existing memoranda or acts related to the issue of artificial intelligence. And here's what I got. Why is this convenient? If you ask Google, for example, it will not really look for specific laws, something that regulates the product of AI. I mean the laws where you will not be able to actually find these words, artificial intelligence. Whereas ChatGPT works in a bit of a different manner. It works fast. It gives you information that is broken down, that is systematized. And sometimes, like the speakers before me have mentioned, your information is not always accurate. I mean, what you're getting, because the engines are trained based on what's out there online. And some of the legislation cited doesn't even exist. So you need to always double check what you're getting. This helps you be quick and efficient, provided that you always double check the results. Plus, moving on to the second issue, if we take intellectual property, for example, and the products that are funded by the donors involving CSOs, we need to keep in mind that every donor finds a specific area or a field and projects from that field. So speaking of intellectual property, it is critical that we keep in mind and track anything related to intellectual property and the products, making sure that those products do not contain anything that is in breach of a copyright held by someone else.
For instance, when we use ChatGPT, that makes the generation of text and articles much more faster. We need to understand that its activity is regulated by the copyright rights law, and that is a special legal regime called sui generis. And this regime is the following: that the person who asked GPT to generate this information won't be recognized as the author of this text, the same as artificial intelligence. But if during our activities we decided to use the text generated by ChatGPT, this article, we need to understand that there can be some extract of in it protected by copyright. And when this article is being presented as ours, potentially we are the people who are using the text of other authors and it's not generated by chat GPT. And that is the threat that not everyone understands. And people generate some text or some image, and after that, they might face the court. Now, in the practice, there are cases when painters. Next slide, please. There are cases when painters addressed Mid-Journey because they thought that their copyright was breached as artificial intelligence generated images that were very similar to theirs. And correspondingly, now this case is in court and waiting for the ruling. At the moment, all the authors, all the painters are trying to do everything possible to protect their works. Igor told us about the program at the very beginning, No AI. It is being used by the painters to put watermarks on their works. And in this case, to prevent its usage, to prevent its usage to train AI, because AI needs human works to be trained. So if you see the painting generated by AI, he won't use it. And this way, they're protecting their copyright at the moment. But there are a lot of works, articles, text in internet, and they do not have such watermarks. Chat GPT is using them, and we need to be careful. We need to check them for the author, and if we use it, we shall check that there is no copyright of other people on it. That's regarding copyright. Also, regarding moratorium, next slide, please. Moratorium for the chat. There is an internal moratorium of the chat when OpenAI put some frames into it, the ones that won't be translated in the responses, and external moratorium. On the slide, you can see the head titles of a couple of articles. Schools in New York prohibited using ChatGPT to generate some works also. People who are dealing with AI, it was prohibited to use ChatGPT to develop the scientific papers. China also prohibited to use it. Now there is such a trend. And now in the outer world. And in the same way, there is a moratorium inside this chat that was implemented by OpenAI to avoid courts, because people, because there are already harassment cases when chat was harassing them. And now there is a chat GPT-4, which is trained for more information. And there are limitations there as well, because in the company OpenAI, there is a need to protect themselves. And I decided to finish with the help of ChatGPT, where he says, I can answer everything, but my knowledge is limited by my experience. Also, I can refuse to answer some question due to some moral or ethical reasons. For instance, everything that is about violence and discrimination. But now there are different forums and people are discussing how to avoid this prohibition. Also, they can ask the chat in such a way so he wouldn't take into account his limitations in its setting. Regarding this impact to civil society organizations, it is very important to follow this trend closely and to understand what kind of products this AI can generate. We need to understand very clearly all the risks and to check all this information. Do not trust it for 100%. And probably to use it just a tool that helps to brainstorm, to generate different ideas, not the author of some texts and articles. Olga, thank you very much. We are already behind the agenda. We have time just for a couple of questions. Now, if there are no questions, then I will try to generalize what we've heard today. So, artificial intelligence, it's our present, and we as civil society organizations, as activists, we must recognize that it's part of our life, and we need to understand how we shall do that. We need to understand the threats and potential of AI. Also, we need to know how to work with it efficiently and to understand that information that helps, that AI helps to collect us can be incorrect, and the use of AI will have some ethical implications. Also, the questions of AI requires legal regulation because it impacts people and personal data. Also, there is something good in the artificial intelligence, and they can be used, but we shall be fully responsible and try to involve it to our work, notwithstanding all these limitations. Also, I made a conclusion that AI cannot replace people, so it's not the threat, but it can impact our rights and freedoms, and we should do everything possible to protect ourselves and our target audiences with which we work as civil society organizations. Thank you very much, everyone, for your active participation. Thank you very much for your questions. And based on which open licenses content generated by AI can be distributed. Maybe some of the speakers can answer this question. Well, let's think about this question and let's include the answer into the materials that we are going to produce based on the results of this forum. Yeah, let's do that. Let's take some time to answer it. Also, if you have some questions on this topic, or maybe you would like to know more about the use of AI, I think SEDEM is the organization that can help you in that. It can advise you how to do it better. And if you want to work with the legislation, you can join the team that will improve the legislation in this direction. If there are no more questions, well, let's wrap up. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much to organizers for this wonderful event. Because what we have in the modern world, we as civil society shall study them and do everything possible not to harm citizens. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Maria, thank you very much for a brilliant moderation and for interesting question. Thank you very much. Take care.